Watch what happens when a man gets a reason to lose control. Someone says something unfair about him. Someone he cares about suddenly pulls away. A message goes unanswered. A decision goes against him. Most men think emotional control means not caring. It doesn't. A controlled man still feels the anger. He still wants the answer. He still feels the rejection. The difference is simple. He feels the impulse, but he doesn't obey it. And that is where most men lose their power. Not when something happens to them, but in the few seconds after it happens, when they allow the event to decide what they do next. Because emotional control isn't becoming emotionless. It's becoming the man who decides what his emotions are allowed to do. Your buttons have a price tag. A friend learns which subject makes his jaw tighten. A colleague learns that questioning his competence in front of others makes him talk twice as long as he needs to. Someone he's dating learns that 30 minutes of silence is enough to make him send a paragraph explaining feelings nobody asked for yet. None of them sat down and planned this. They simply noticed the way anyone notices what works. And the moment they notice, some of the mystery that made him worth paying attention to quietly disappears. That's the uncomfortable engineering behind most relationships. Once a person knows which sentence makes a man defensive, they hold a small amount of leverage over his evening, sometimes his whole week. They don't even have to use it maliciously. They just have to know it exists, and some part of them will reach for it the next time they want his attention, his reassurance, or his surrender in an argument. Epictetus built an entire philosophy around one blunt distinction. Some things are ours to command, and everything else simply isn't. Another person's mood isn't ours. Their opinion of us isn't ours. Their timing, their silence, their approval. None of it belongs to us, no matter how much it feels like it should. A man's response is the only property he actually holds title to. Most men spend their whole lives defending land that was never theirs. The reply, he never sends. Picture a holiday dinner. An uncle makes a sharp comment about his career, his weight, his choices, loud enough that the whole table hears it and goes quiet, waiting to see if he'll bite. His chest gets hot. His mind is already drafting the line that would make the man regret it in front of everyone. And then he doesn't say it. He just looks at him, long enough that it stops being comfortable for the uncle, not for him. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't defend himself. He lets the comment sit there on the table with nowhere to go, because the only person willing to pick it back up was supposed to be him, and he never reaches for it. Anger hands people a receipt. It tells them exactly what landed, exactly where a man is soft, exactly which button to press next time they want a reaction out of him. A blank, unbothered face gives them nothing to work with. Marcus Aurelius used to write himself the same reminder over and over in the private notebook that was never meant for anyone else's eyes. The event is one thing. What a man decides it means is another thing entirely, and only one of those two is negotiable. Most men treat the meaning as automatic. It isn't. It's a decision made in under a second, and it can be made differently. By the time dinner's over, the insult belongs entirely to the man who said it. He's the one still carrying it home. Rejection doesn't lie about what you believe. It's easy for a man to look composed when everything's going his way, when she's texting back fast, when the offer comes through, when people are choosing him without being asked. That version of calm has never actually been tested. Real evidence shows up the moment someone says no. A crucial connection suddenly grows cold. A friend goes quiet for reasons he never explains. Someone else gets the promotion he was quietly certain was his. The instinct is immediate. Explain himself. Ask what changed. Try to force a response that might fix whatever's broken. Underneath all of it sits one desperate, unspoken question. Tell me I still matter. That question is a heavier thing to hand someone than it looks like on the surface. He's not asking for information anymore. He's asking for permission to feel like himself again. And permission like that should never have left his own hands in the first place. A man who's actually anchored still feels the loss. He's not numb to it. He can be disappointed, even quietly wrecked for a while. But he doesn't let someone else's decision become the final word on what he's worth. He grieves the door closing without asking the person on the other side to reopen it just so he can feel steady again. And the moment he stops needing to be chosen, the choices he does make finally start meaning something. Status gets decided in the silence. Watch two men take the exact same public criticism, and 10 seconds will reveal more about them than a year of small talk ever could. A manager calls out a mistake on a video call with the whole team watching. The first man interrupts before the sentence even finishes, pointing at timelines, at other people, at anything that isn't him. His voice climbs. He needs everyone on that call to know it wasn't his fault before they've even decided to blame him. The second man says nothing until the manager is finished speaking. Then he asks one short question. What specifically needs to change? That's it. No defense, no excuses, no performance for the people watching his square on the screen. Nobody on that call has to be told which man is actually secure. The first one just told everyone, without meaning to, exactly how fragile his position feels from the inside. The second one showed them something rarer, that his sense of himself doesn't collapse just because one moment went badly. People don't hand out respect because a man demands it loudly. They hand it to the one who clearly doesn't need it handed to him at all. What makes this harder than it sounds is that the urge to defend himself in that moment doesn't feel like insecurity from the inside. It feels like justice. It feels like something true is being distorted, and only he can fix it fast enough. That feeling is almost always a lie. A man's pride is telling him in real time, dressed up as principle. The ones who learn to catch that lie before it opens their mouth for them are the ones people end up trusting with harder problems. Suppression is not the same discipline. Here's where most men who think they've mastered this get it completely backwards. There's a version of staying calm that looks identical to self-command from the outside and is actually its opposite on the inside. Picture a man receiving a passive-aggressive comment, smiling politely and keeping his voice perfectly level. Everyone walks away impressed by how little it seemed to affect him. Except for the next 3 nights, he's replaying the exact moment on a loop, rewriting what he should have said, imagining the version where he wins, waiting for some future chance to even the score. He looks controlled. He is anything but. He's just moved the entire war underground, where nobody can see him losing it. Seneca spent an entire volume warning against exactly this, because he understood something most self-help advice still gets wrong. Anger convinces a man he's protecting his dignity when he's really just protecting his pride, and pride is a far more fragile thing to guard. Suppression doesn't make an emotion disappear. It just removes the exit, and pressure that has no exit eventually finds one on its own, usually at the worst possible moment, aimed at the wrong person. Real command isn't the absence of the feeling. It's the ability to let anger exist in his chest without letting it drive the car. Fear can be present without deciding his next move. Jealousy can show up without writing his next sentence for him. If any of this sounds familiar, looking fine on the outside while something keeps replaying at 2 a.m., that's usually the first sign a man is ready for the next level of this work. Stoic horology exists for exactly that moment. Nobody is watching when it counts. Composure in public is a performance almost anyone can pull off for an audience. The real test happens later, alone, where there's no one left to impress. It's the phone in his hand at midnight, the reply half-typed, every nerve in his body convinced that sending it will finally make things even. It's opening someone's profile for the 4th time in an hour, telling himself it's the last time. It's the version of the argument he keeps having in the shower with someone who isn't even there. Nobody sees any of that. There's no applause for putting the phone down, no witness to the version of him that chose not to send it. But that's precisely where the actual man gets built. Not in the moments people are watching, but in the ones only he will ever know about. A man can convince 1,000 people he's disciplined. Convincing himself at midnight with nobody watching is a different and far harder job. People who loved his reactivity. Eventually, the people around a man notice the shift, and not all of them like it. Some lean in closer, relieved to finally be around someone whose mood doesn't run the whole household. Others pull back, unsettled, without fully understanding why. A friend who was used to him agreeing with every complaint might suddenly call him distant. Someone who got a strange comfort from watching him chase reassurance might accuse him of going cold. A coworker who used to provoke him into looking defensive in meetings might start avoiding him altogether, frustrated that the old move stopped working. That's the part nobody warns a man about. Some relationships were never actually built on him. They were built on his predictability. When the predictability disappears, so does the arrangement that depended on it. It's worth asking, honestly, which people in his life were attached to him, and which were attached to how easily he used to move. Waiting, without needing an answer. Most emotional explosions aren't really about the thing that triggered them. They're an attempt to make an unbearable not knowing disappear as fast as possible. He doesn't know where he stands with someone, so he reaches out impulsively just to break the silence. He doesn't know what his boss actually thought of the presentation, so he replays every sentence he said, looking for the crack. The untrained mind treats an unfinished story like an emergency. It wants closure now, even bad closure, because bad closure feels better than none. Maturity looks almost boring by comparison. It's the ability to sit inside the not knowing without rushing to end it, not performing patience for anyone, just genuinely not needing the answer tonight. That single skill, more than any comeback or clever line, is probably the single most attractive thing a man can develop, because it tells everyone around him something true. His stability doesn't run on other people's timelines. It shows up in smaller ways too, easy to miss if a man isn't looking for them. The friend who doesn't need to know why he canceled. The version of him that can hear, "We need to talk," without spending the next 6 hours building a case for his own defense. Uncertainty stops feeling like a threat the moment a man stops treating his own peace as something that has to be settled immediately to be real. Letting someone go without a war. There's a specific kind of walking away that looks like strength, but is actually still a leash. It's the exit where some part of a man is hoping the other person regrets it, where he's already rehearsing the moment they see his life going well without them and feel the loss they deserve to feel. That version of leaving keeps the other person fully in charge of his attention. He's still checking, still measuring their reaction to his absence, still, in some quiet corner of his mind, performing for someone who has already moved on without him. There's a completely different kind of walking away, and it's far less satisfying in the moment. It doesn't need them to lose sleep over it. It doesn't need the story to end with them regretting anything. Marcus Aurelius returned again and again to a single, unglamorous discipline, keeping his attention fixed on his own judgment and conduct, because that was the only territory a man actually governs. Betrayal, disappointment, someone choosing wrong, none of it changes who he decides to be afterward, unless he hands over that decision too. Freedom has nothing to do with being watched. Somewhere in all of this, the actual point tends to get missed. This was never really about looking unbothered in front of people. A man can master every technique in this video and still be governed completely by the fear of what people think of his composure. The deeper shift happens somewhere quieter than that. It's the moment a man stops needing every person around him to confirm his worth before he can feel steady in his own decisions. He can be misread and let it go uncorrected. He can be disliked by someone whose opinion used to keep him up at night and sleep fine anyway. He can lose an argument, lose a woman, lose a job, and wake up the next morning still recognizably himself. That's the actual force underneath everything this channel talks about. Not the silence, not the calm face, not the ability to outweight someone in an argument. Underneath all of it is a man who simply stopped renting his peace out to whoever happened to be watching that day. He still feels everything, the anger, the want, the grief, the joy. He just never hands any of it the keys. If that's the man you're building toward, say it plainly in the comments. I stay in control. Not as a slogan, as a decision you're making right now before this video ends and life goes back to testing exactly what you just heard. And if this is the kind of thinking you want more of in your week, Stoic horology is where it lives. Because the attraction was never about being unreadable. It was never a trick, a pause, or a clever line withheld at the right moment. It was always a man who decided once and for all what his emotions are allowed to do with him.